Hey, we got another Tim Cain reaction today. Seen the game in the prototype. Let's jump in. I got nothing to say before it. Other than that, we are in our prototype phase ourselves, so this should be a nice little lesson and refresher for us.
Hi everyone, it's me, Tim.
Tim, I've missed you, man. I've been so busy working. I've missed you. How have you been, Tim? Let me know in the comments below.
Today I want to talk about seeing the game in the prototype.
Yep.
Now the alternate titles for this video were going to be, should you be a game director, or a litmus test for game directors? Because I think
Interesting. So it's more like, are you able to see the... I bet what he's going to say is, are you able to look at like basic prototype or blockout and actually see what the game is supposed to, like in your mind's eye, can you see what the game is supposed to become? And then make sure that that is reached for. Like you have a blueprint for success. You know what needs to be built. I like it. Give him your beverage, or should I just pour it out?
this is such an important ability to be able to do that anyone at the game director level or above should be able to do this. And if they can't, so let's dive into that.
Okay.
First of all, what's a prototype? A prototype is when, especially when you're making a big game, but I think it helps in all games. I think indies should do this as well, but a prototype is where you put in all of your foundational features, things like walking or climbing, basic dialogue, any foundational system mechanic that you have that either every player is going to do or is a unique mechanic for your game, and therefore you want to get it in early and play around with it.
Yeah, I would even go a little bit further to say that I think a good prototyping phase is also useful for determining unknowns. So you might have a risky feature that you don't either have the tech already built for, or something that you don't know how to do, and the prototype kind of allows you to mess around in a dedicated, messy environment, figure out how you're going to build it, and then do the refactor and build it for real. Very, very useful. But I agree with Tim that I think indie developers should do this too. Or if your game is small enough, like super small, maybe you don't need to worry about this, and you can just kind of use your game as a prototype, learn what you can, and then just jump into the next game. Don't try to perfect it. You're not going to perfect your first games anyway. If that were true, then every game that would come out from like a AAA studio would be perfect, and we know that that's not the case. But yeah, prototyping is really important. Just, as he says, find the fun, figure out what you want to do, test if it works, and then build on top of that.
And then the prototypes also serve other reasons. They lets level designers lay down a map to get an idea for the size and the flow,
yeah.
How everything's arranged. What the prototype isn't, the prototype is not for art, lighting, user interface. No, those are in there at the barest level of functionality, just enough to let you do those things I just mentioned.
The amount of times, though, that I have to answer, and the reason that we stream early development is precisely because of the reason that Tim is mentioning, that I think that there are a lot of gamers who have not seen what super early pre-production looks like, and I want to expose that, but the trouble is that by exposing that, it does just bring up a lot of questions that I have to answer over and over and over again. It's like, why does your level look like shit? It's like, well, because we don't know what the level should be yet. Why does your you have your game built, where's your user interface? It's like, well, that takes a lot of time to make, and we haven't set in stone what our user interface should look like or how it should work. And if we wasted time making these really good looking meshes before we even know how our level is going to play, or if we want a certain section, it's just a waste of time. It's a waste of time in there for money, especially when you have that burn down, and you need to manage your budget. You only need to do the things that actually serve a purpose in the milestone that you need it to be solved in. As Tim says, your prototype is for finding those unique features, testing them out, seeing what they look like, playing around with how they feel. And only then, once you've verified that, you have your unknowns figured out, you've blueprinted your map towards getting to vertical slice, and you have that vision document, you have your pillars, your GDD written up. Only then can you actually start to extrapolate what you need in each milestone and when you need it, and then start to build towards that. But I bet Tim is going to jump into here about how, like seeing the game in the prototype, or I think what he mentioned was like, being a good game director. Can you actually see that? Can you take an early prototype of, I don't know, let's just use Redlock as an example, since we already have a build up here. And this is a perfect example because we're in pre-production. We are literally doing block out and building out the game's foundation. We have, placeholder, generic widgets, and basic Roboto font that comes prepackaged with Unreal. And when you go to like one of our levels here, it's all block out. Because we don't need to have this looking good to see if it's fun. We need to make a fun level to test if it's fun. And this is how this level is going to look like for many, many, many more months as we are determining art style in the background, building out a beautiful corner, making an asset list of this because we are starting to feel pretty happy with how this level looks. But even then, we're not going to start meshing any of those things yet until we have confirmed it, see if there's any problems, tweak around, continue to add mechanics that we need to have here to test them out. Because if we don't need, for instance, I don't know, let's just say, for instance, there's a feature that we think will be fun and would require a lot of new meshes. If we decide that we don't want that feature after prototyping it, then we don't need to make those meshes. But if we make the meshes before we get to the point where we decide we don't want it, it's a waste of time that we could have been spent doing something else. So it's exactly as Tim says, basic UI, block out. We don't even have a character model yet because we don't need it. But we've focused on, our 3 C's, make sure controls feel good, make sure our mantling and climbing technology is there because that's like the core to our platformer game. Make fun levels because I think a platformer game is really strongly driven by level design. And then everything beyond that, the interesting setting is flavor that will enhance the core gameplay, but is not the core gameplay. And that requires me as kind of like the game director in this case to see the vision, to have in my mind's eye, my imagination, how is this level going to look when it's finished, and how do we actually get to that point? And yeah, not everybody is like that. I've worked with some game directors who don't have that ability to see that.
I've described what a prototype is in my video on game stages, and I'll put that in the description. I also showed the prototype in the Outer Worlds launch video.
This is perfect. Yeah, look at this. This is exceptional. I mean, you can see exactly where it's like there's no final art here. It's just gray boxed. But it gives you a good sense of scale and of how you want to structure a level. And, if you have, for instance, Outer Worlds had like stealthing, and, it was combat based. So you have different things here to denote, cover or ways that you can get around. Enemy placement with very basic models. Yeah, this is great. Great and teal. Yeah, there are teal boxes. I wonder what they were using those to denote. Maybe blue. I could be wrong, but maybe blue were things that were breakable. I'm not sure.
I will link that below as well if you want to watch everything about Outer Worlds from its initial prototype through Beautiful Corner and when we shipped.
Yeah, look, you can see this, like, because, Outer Worlds is Unreal, right? So you can even see they're using basic Roboto font here, too, and just some screen space widget for the health bar and the name and their awareness level, because they don't want to build anything more complex than that at the moment. And super, super basic radial widgets here for different statuses, ammunition, health, sprint, or stamina, things like that.
From its initial prototype through Beautiful Corner and when we shipped, and, a peek at the launch party.
That's cool. That looks
the
really good.
reason you make a prototype is the most important part. I mean, I just talked about what was in it, but why are you even making it? A prototype exists purely to test your ideas, substantiated, to see if you should proceed with them and how you should proceed with them. I've mentioned this a lot of times before. No one just sits there and goes, I have an idea for a game and it is sprung perfectly from my brain and will require absolutely no changes. It's this is why you end up with spaghetti code. I talked about.
I will be honest though, I have worked with people who thought that they could do that and who convinced people higher up in management that that's how it worked. And they build these like milestone plans that are like, okay, this is not even a fake story. I wish it were fake. But it was like, okay, we know our game needs feature X, feature Y, and feature Z. And this is before there's any prototyping that's been done on those features. And they're like, okay, well we're gonna sell milestone 1 to the publisher. And that'll be a, let's say, I don't know, 2-month milestone, right? And we're just gonna include these 3 features in that milestone. And we hadn't prototyped them. We had no design documentation for them. We didn't even know if we could do them. And even if we thought we could do them, we didn't know how we could do them because we didn't prototype it. And so it's just like, yeah, write shit on a piece of paper and that's it, pretty much. This is how you should not develop a game, is just make this up. You make your prototype, you spend pre-production to determine how, what is this feature? Let's say it's our game with, platforming. We have a feature of restoration stations that restore damage, or that can like restore health over time, and then a whole effect manager. I built that. It took us like half a day, and then another half a day of like some fixing bugs. So we know what we need to do. We know that it's not a problem. We already have this, it's solved. The code could be, improved. It could be refactored so that it's maybe a little bit more performant friendly, even though it is pretty performant already. And we just need to we know we need to add icons. We know that we need to refactor the MVVM for how it communicates with the UI. We know that we need a more proper UI for it. And so we've already resolved the parts that were confusing, which was, I've never made a damage over time controller, so I didn't know how long it would take. I thought it would take a week. It took me half a day. So we've solved the hard part. And now we know exactly what needs to be done to finish that up. And we can say, okay, well, do we need localization for this? Do we need sound for this? Yes. Let's write up a document. Now we can say milestone 1 has feature X, and feature X requires that we do this, and this. Refactor the core code, refactor the MVVM, make a proper UI widget, localize text, proper icons, proper sound, and we can kind of, break those down if we need to more granularly too, in order to determine how much time. So we solved our unknowns. Now it is a known, and if you're familiar with the known unknown matrix, and then we can figure out how much time that's going to take. And that would be like, okay, well, we know icons, artist, how long will icons take? Half a day for the icons. Okay, localization, we're going to outsource. So that is a little bit of management overhead, but that's not on us. And then the sound designer, we need 8 sounds. Half a day for you. Okay, so, we can start to break it down and say, okay, feature X, 1 week. 1 week we can have feature X done. But if you don't do that, you go with your initial thought, which is, I think this feature is going to take 1 week, but it actually takes 1 week to make the full proper feature for it. And so that's what the pre-production, that's what the prototyping really allows you to do, is accurately break down how long it's going to take to make your game and your vertical slice. And then from vertical slice, you can kind of scale that outwards. Based on, we know that we've implemented 2 damage over time effects. We know we'll need 4 more. So we know we need localization, icons, sounds for that. And then put those, I don't know, maybe in like an in-game guide or wiki or whatever you have. And that will need its own text as well. You extrapolate. How you doing, Luigi?
This in the
Sorry,
spaghetti
Tim.
code video.
Back to Tim.
Weirdly, though, in my career, throughout my career, I've noticed that some people absolutely are incapable of making any use of the prototype. Meaning, they cannot look past the gray boxed buildings and
Yes.
props
God, yes.
and the T-posed people. They
and
can't
see
look
the
past that
gameplay.
and see the game.
Exactly, Tim. Holy shit. Yeah. I've met game developers that are like this, but thankfully many of them were not in the decision making part of this. But when I'm dictating, let's say I shouldn't use the word dictating, but when I'm communicating to like our 3D artist Rex, we have I'll go back to room 2 here. Give me a sec. When I tell him about what the initial premise of the game is supposed to be, and what we're going for a hard sci-fi setting, it's supposed to be more realistic, but we need to have good determination of how we're going to solve background art components versus components that the player is meant to pick apart from the level. We can start to break down, and he as an artist should be able to visualize the meshes that he sees replacing these blockouts, right? What's the name of the game? The name is Redlock. And you can type !game to see a little bit of an explanation of what it's going to be. But this is our pre-production, this is our prototype, and it looks very ugly. If I showed this though to a publisher, they wouldn't question why is this a blockout. They would say, oh, it's a blockout. They wouldn't question it, why does your UI look like shit? They'll be like, yeah, don't worry about it. It's fixed later. They won't have these questions, but you will have, I think gamers will have this question, which is why you have a lot of developers and publishers not showing this to players, understandably. And you do end up with some developers who just don't have the imagination to see what this looks like or what this is supposed to look like. But a game director absolutely needs to have that. And the reason that you build out game design documentation or mood boards or concept art is to help spread that vision and align it between teams and team members. You make your concept art so your artists and your 3D artists actually understand what's the vibe, what's the color palette, what's the mesh complexity, what are the textures that we're looking for here, what are the things that we want to stand out or to light up. Your lighting artist might want to know that. It's all very important to aligning vision, and a game director, I think, needs to make a constant work out of aligning the team to the vision and making sure that it doesn't stray off the path. Right? That we don't say, well, to me, this is hard sci-fi, but I can't be the kind of game director that says, okay, what's your idea for the game? Oh, we should have alien species that are running around. But it's like, okay, sure, we can do it. No. That's not this universe. That's not this vision. That's a different game. And that's not a bad game, but it's a different game. And so we're trying to make this game, let's save the alien species for a different game that we do. Your buddies picked up Unity because we were more comfortable with it. There's no bad engine. There's just an engine that will work better for the game that you're making, or for the team that you're using. We don't like any engine elitism over here. Every engine has its pros and cons.
Well, and this is okay if you're not making important decisions, but by the time you reach a lead level and by sure a game director level and higher, you should be able to look at a prototype and imagine the finished game and make important decisions based on that. And yet, there were several times in my career I found myself working with or for someone who was incapable of doing that. Ironically, after the game shipped, suddenly they sounded incredibly visionary and, imparted great ideas into the game. Right. Yet I watched them be incapable of looking at a prototype and seeing past it and seeing what we're trying to do. So you get feedback like, this was awful, and no one would play something like this, and this is amateur hour. These are all feedback.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard stuff too, like, oh, the textures or the shaders on the meshes don't match up, and it's like, yeah, because I'm using asset packs and they're from two different creators. Like you're not supposed to look at that asset and say, oh wow, what a bad texture. It's a box, it's a crate. Just imagine a crate. It's what it represents. Like I don't care if the textures don't line up here because it's prototyping. We don't have any of the final art in the level yet. It's supposed to serve a purpose, and sometimes a box serves a purpose, and sometimes the proper mesh serves a bit of a purpose, right? What's my Python knowledge level? 0. It's a snake. I know that. People don't understand, like I said, they don't care. Remember the GTA 6 leaks? I was going to bring up the GTA 6 leaks, Tramux, because I think that's a perfect example. But I absolutely agree. The GTA 6 leaks were the perfect test of whether or not, how players saw early prototypes. And it was very unfortunate. I'm glad that other developers came out to support that, and I think we also saw a lot of developers and publishers share early versions of their games too, which kind of quickly put the matter to bed. For a lot of people, at least. How you doing, Silent?
I got from prototypes, to the point where one time I had to go into someone's office and go, "Do you understand what that was? I was trying to show you how a mechanic would work. I don't care what the animation was.
Right?
I don't care what the other NPCs were T-posed. Why would you even comment on that?"
I
It's
just said that too. Rex and I had a call yesterday and we were talking about like the hand IK. And we ran into some issues with the hand IK and the rotation of the hands to the point where it's like, you know what? We'll solve it when we solve it. It's not important. It could happen a year from now, 2 years from now. We don't need to solve it now. I thought it would be something that would be like a very quick task. It turns out it wasn't really a quick task, or there's something that we're missing. We have more important things to focus on, so we're going to shift to the more important things and leave hand IK for when we have some free time. When I'm really busy with something and Rex doesn't have anything to do, then we can jump back into that. And so, we need to constantly reassess and stay in communication about what needs to be done next, because we have a lot of things to resolve in our prototype. And if we don't answer those questions, we could do a lot of work, like a lot of meshing or level design, that ultimately wouldn't be, we would have to go back and refactor it or refix certain things because of information that we should have obtained earlier on in development. Made a game where you control mechs using Python scripts to pass the missions. That's really cool. I love that. I'm a big fan of like Zachtronics games, and I assume that somebody like you probably knows who Zachtronics is if you made a game like that. Big fan of that.
like we had just had two different meetings in there. Everybody was there to judge mechanics from a prototype, and then you were there thinking we were showing you a beautiful corner or something.
Yep.
I remember I was so frustrated by it that I was trying to find an example that I could, when I wanted to complain about NAS game dev friends. And this is purely me wanting to complain to someone who didn't know about game development. And I said, I can only imagine that there are people in the music industry that when someone's working on a song and they've written the lyrics and they may have like a short little riff, like the music is going to be like this,
Yeah.
I'm not a musician, that there must be people in charge, production folks, managers, people who are going to pull the ripcord and make a decision on, yeah, we're going forward with the song, who absolutely cannot tell from a riff and a set of lyrics that the song would be good.
I can see that. I can see that because, they're like really popular. I really do like strong lyrical music, but I also like a lot of music that doesn't have any lyrics in it. It could go either way. But I mean, one of the most famous songs of, I think one of our generations was Around the World. And that was literally just the same lyric repeated over and over and over again, right? There's also an awful lot of popular music that has just really simple, stupid lyrics. Like there's no intelligence behind the lyrics at all. Or it's just, rewording something that has been said in song a million times before. And it ends up blowing the charts up. So yeah, I don't think I can judge a song by its lyrics. I certainly wouldn't know how to do that. I guess I could tell if like a song had good vibes, but that's just my opinion. Like I don't even know how that would I don't know how that would influence the markets, right? Because I listen to a lot of songs that are older, not newer. So I'd probably be a pretty bad person to ask if those would be successful. I know games, but even then I can't predict if a game is going to succeed or not. I can kind of predict it, but it's not a guarantee. I've been wrong about a lot of games before.
Would be good. And just to kind of prove this, that it's hard to do, this is the number one song in 1987, which I picked because that's when I graduated from college. The blonde waitresses take their trays, they spin around, and they cross the floor. They've got moves. You drop your drink and they bring you more. That was.
Yeah, it's like. It's like the most just like bland reading of the most bland lyrics ever. Wasn't there? I think it was who was the comedian? Bill Burr, I think had a bit where he was talking about like women who play cat and mouse in the bedroom, and they're like, "No, stop it! Don't do that." And he was talking about how like in court, you don't want to have the reading of her dialogue be like, "No, stop! Please don't do that. Stop it." Because it's like the whole context changes behind that. Opposite is true too. That's true. Yeah, I mean, I make it. It's my job to think about games. So yeah, I would say that generally speaking, I can predict when a game will be successful, but that's not a guarantee. And anybody who tells you your game is going to be so successful, look what happened with High Guard. Okay, you can't trust people even who are in like positions of big authority with this stuff. Tell you the name if you want to check it out on Steam, but I don't want to be cheap. Go into our Discord, Luigi, if you want, and you can post about it there. Because right now we're doing some Tim Kaine stuff. No, people said Marathon is going to be Concord 3. Look, I mean, I'll tell you what, Marathon is not my type of game, so I wouldn't give my opinion on it at all. I can't tell you if the game will be successful or not, just because I don't play those kinds of games. They're not my forte. Could go either way.
That was the number one song in 1987. How many of you know what it is? That was Walk Like an Egyptian by the Bangles.
That was Walk Like an Egyptian? I do not remember the lyrics of that. I would not have called it that was the song.
Because when they sing it and there's music, it sounds really good. Don't believe me? Think, oh, that's an archaic grandpa song? Okay, here was the number one song in 2025. Wherever you go, that's where I'll follow. Nobody's promised tomorrow. So I'm going to love you every night like it's the last night. Like it's the last night.
Tim, you can whisper that in my ear any day of the week.
Would you hear that? Would you read those lyrics and go, yep, that's the number one song? But that's Die with a Smile by Bruno Mars and Lady Gaga. Number one song in 2025.
I mean, okay, devil's advocate, small devil's advocate. I think that the people singing it do have an impact. But that's also kind of true in games, right? Where even if there was a shitty game made by a studio that routinely puts out hits, people would still buy it. Like financially, the game would probably still be successful. But I mean, okay, put it this way. Okay, Crimson Desert is not out yet. I'm not gonna make any predictions about Crimson Desert. But let's say, for the sake of argument, Crimson Desert's story is pretty bland and trash. But the gameplay is 10 out of 10. People won't care. There are a lot of people that won't care.
I bet you a lot of people can't see lyrics and go, that's a good song. I bet you a lot of people can't hear the main, I keep saying riff because I don't know musical terms, can't hear the main musical thematic element of a song and go, yeah, that's going to be a good song. And if they can't, this isn't a bad thing. If people can't do that, you can't do it. But if you can't, maybe you should not have a very high level position in music production. Maybe you shouldn't make decisions on what artists and what songs get produced or not. Because if you can't do that, maybe there's something wrong with your head and you should step aside and let someone who can do that make those decisions. And that's what I'm saying here. If you can't see a prototype like this and envision a final game like this, then maybe, just maybe, game development leadership is not for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good way of putting it. Are any of you not game developers, or maybe not in a role where you would have to see the end product? I mean, maybe it helps the side by side because you can kind of get a spoiler of what the game ended up looking like. At least for me, I can look at the right and like I can see it because I'm like, okay, what are the interesting mechanics? Is the gunfighting fun? They had like this kill cam here. I have played Outer Worlds, of course.
Leadership is
But yeah,
not.
like they had this cool animation for the hand because this was probably something that they were trying to sell. Was they were trying to build like their own New Vegas world. They have this. They have like a radio menu for abilities. So I'm judging it like how is the gameplay feeling because you can just put textures onto the wall and there's your finished art for it. You can add cluttering, you can add the bodies that you can loot. I mean, that's to a certain extent, looting is pretty core to it, but I can kind of see that, right? You do an incredible. You are a game dev. Did some maps for UT, played with mods, and that's it. UT, which game is that?
Just maybe development leadership is not for you. I've seen people who can't do this, who are in those positions, and they are nothing but a speed bump on the road to making a good game. And
what did he just say?
in those positions, and they are nothing but a speed bump on the road to making a good game.
I love that.
And unfortunately, these people exist. They've always existed. They exist now. By the way, I'm using examples from Outer Worlds. I obviously don't think it's that because I was the game director. But, well, and Leonard. I shouldn't say and Leonard. So I'm using an example because I don't want to show you the examples I'm thinking of, which are both some games I've worked on that ran into massive speed bumps until we were almost done, and then suddenly everybody loved it.
Been there.
Or other games where I've talked to game development friends of mine, and they've had the same issue. They're like, they had this great idea, they demonstrated it in a prototype, everyone's like, woo. Suddenly, once really good art got done and demonstrated the exact same mechanic, but the person was moving smoothly, and the props were pretty, suddenly everybody loved it. And he was like, I get that for most people, but the people I had to get past, who are one of the goalposts or one of the, speed bumps that are deliberately put in your way so you can show what you're doing, maybe those people shouldn't be in charge of making that decision.
I think there's another element to this, though, a small element, and it's not to discredit what Tim is saying, but rather, I think being able to envision the final product is very important, but also knowing how to execute the right maneuvers. If you think of like Kerbal Space Program, right? You have a limited amount of delta V to get from one planet to another. And if you don't execute that well, then the amount of delta V you have does not actually matter. So you need to pull out the right maneuvers and maybe save a little bit for course correction, right? Just in case that you make a mistake. And I think game dev is a lot like that, where you can be given all of the right tools and set up for success. You can even envision that final product and be really good at defending it. But if you don't know how to execute that and be agile and say, no, let's not focus on this yet because feature X is more important to make now. And if feature X ends up this way, then we don't need feature Y. Or we don't need as much of feature Y, and we can save time and money there. So, focusing on feature Y might be more fun to do, but we can't do that yet until feature X is handled, or, task X is handled, let's say. And I think that a good game director, although it really comes down to production, but a game director is in production. Same with your leads. They need to all be able to see this and have enough granular knowledge of their own team in order to inform the game director and the producers of how long it's going to take to do certain things. And all of that then is dictated by good prototyping, as Tim is making this video about. Good prototyping. Resolve your unknowns, find the fun, tweak it, and then blueprint your pathway to success, to that final vision, but having that game director always there to guide the team, right? To make sure that you're ignoring the outside influence and elements that may not be relevant here. Yes, you want a game with alien species, fine. That's not our game. Go play Mass Effect. Great game, great series. That's not our game. If you're expecting that from our game is not for you. I don't recommend buying it. You're not going to like it. And you need the right personality and you need a really good imagination, because oftentimes the game director or the lead designers are the people who have that perfect vision of what that final game is going to look like and how it plays and how it feels to play it in their mind before a single line of code is written. And then, execute that direction to success. And that is really hard to do as
well. Charge of making that decision. Anyway, if you've ever thought about being a game director, I really think that a good test of whether you can do that is, can you look at a prototype and imagine the final game?
I agree. I think that that's a really good test of it too. But like I said, I think that's only like one half of it. Can you then execute it? Can you then blueprint what needs to happen for that? Do you know the proper order for that? And I think I've worked for companies, and I've seen companies where they want to put the cart before the horse, because there was somebody in management who said, well, the game looks ugly, can we make some art for it? And it's like, well, sure, we can make art for it, but we might not need that art. We don't know where that art should go. So throwing too many bodies at the problem right now is a waste of time. And what you really need to do is, you need to start. Let me draw here. Pre-production is scary, right? It's very scary. But you kind of have to take game one and start building it. Let's just say this is game one. And before game one is even finished, you need to start the pre-production here, because you need a very lean, agile, small team to work on game two. I shouldn't have cut it there. Just, it goes onwards. And this is your pre-production, right? This is pre-pro. And your first game might be longer pre-pro because you're building out tools and some internal pipelines if you're a new company. But then the ideal scenario is that you spend a bit more time on game one in pre-production to save some time in game two, right? You know that game two is probably good. Let's say you're making like an open world RPG. You have dialogue, you have choices, you have an inventory system. Spend the time in game one to make good, relatively modular systems for those that then you can just import into game two and build right off of, right? Or, even better, just build new maps, make new character models, write new dialogue, add a couple new features that you wanted to have in game one but didn't have the time or budget for, include those in game two, and those would be the new unique features that are going to make the sequel or the new game better. And then game three, you continue that process. But if you start this too late, you have a lot of people that are waiting for work, but they don't have any work to do in this phase of pre-production. They have no work to do. And I think that if you get caught into that trap, it's very, very common that your company will go under, because you did it wrong and you're wasting money. You have to fire people. You have a lot of those people that have invested time and knowledge and skill into the company, and you might have to try to rehire them if you can manage to get to production and start working on your vertical slice or your alpha for game two. I've seen a lot of companies fail because of this. You need to start pre-production early, but that requires that you do pre-production for game one well enough that you actually can move people over from game one. Because at this phase, you should have the game designed. You should have it designed. It might need balancing, it might need content addition, but you can move one of your designers over, or even have them take half of their day or half of the week to work with another coder and producer to work on game two. But if you can't afford to do that, in a lot of cases, you messed up pre-production of game one, and now you're screwed. You are screwed. What if you're a solo dev? Well, it's gonna be harder. I can tell you that. It's gonna be harder. You're just gonna have to do the best you can, because there's nobody else that you can move over. If you're a solo dev, it's like you can't afford to move over to a new game until you finish this one. And finishing a game, I can tell you, is more of the battle than anything else, because you need content, you need to localize, you need to bug fix. You have to add all the sounds. It's just so much tedious work. So much. But if you do pre-production, the better you do pre-production, the better you prototype, I think the less stress that alpha and beta will have. It's just a lot of busy work. You know what levels you need, you know what NPCs you need. You just got to do it. You just got to commit to it. You got to make that level. You know what level it should be, you know what it should be based on. You just got to finish it. And that is a lot of work. An awful lot of work. Hey, either way, great video from Tim, as usual. Guys, go give Tim a like and subscribe. Please go give him a sub. He's the one that makes all the effort here. Go give him some love. And hey, if you like that one on YouTube, keep your eye out, because I like to post a lot of these, and we can probably do 1 to 2 more of these today, and then we'll just see if people like them. All right, take care, YouTube.